Praise you, Yahuah. Your will be done, Father. All right. As I navigate this morning, looks a little different than I'm used to. All right. I think I'm sharing already. This thing's in my way. There we go. All right. We've been on a journey of finding truth of the scriptures, and one of the major obstacles or hurdles that I've had personally is this calendar. And I've been able to get together with some other believers, and we had a discussion last week partially, and with our other fellowship that we do when we're finished with this one. And many have agreed, but still there's some that's not, and we haven't got through this whole study. And I wanted to tackle this. Therefore, I've got together with a brother, Yadiel, and we've come together and collaborated, and we really put this together where I think it's going to be clear enough for everyone when I'm done presenting the information that you're going to be able to determine how Yahuah's calendar works. Because Yahuah does have a set-apart calendar that no man can really tamper with. We can't mess with it if we just got to pay attention to it. But there's so many different opinions out there and different versions of what the truth is. And this is causing a lot of controversy regarding the determination of the beginning of the scriptural year. But there's a simple solution to the problem that would bring harmony and uniformity to this important subject. So, when does a year begin, and what makes that determination? All confusion is eliminated when Yahuah's simple instructions are followed. Year, Shaneh, or month, Kodesh, day, Yom, and it all really culminates around the spring equinox. Then you have your new month, your new moon, which is 2320, Chodesh, of Abib. So it's important that we find out and establish the first month of the year, which is the Abib. And then from there, it's the 14th of Abib, which is Pesach or Passover. So really, it's as simple as that as far as bringing this together, as simple as ABC. So blow the shofar at the Chodesh, or the new moon. From Chodesh, or the renewed, at the Kesha, or the full moon, and on our feast days, according to Psalms 81:3. So those are different versions of when we're supposed to blow the shofar. At the new moon, the Chodesh, at the renewed, or the renewed moon, if you will, as it's coming forth out of what we call the darkness, the conjunction moon. And at the full moon, the Kesha, on our feast day. So these are all times when we got to observe and blow the shofar to make the announcement of when we are during these months and year. Hallelujah. So like the 394, Yareka, the moon, it will be established forever, a faithful witness in the skies, or the Shamayim, Shelah, Psalms 89:37. That's talking about the moon. It's established forever. It's a witness in the skies. Hallelujah. All of these things that he's put up into the Shamayim, the sun, the moon, and the stars or the constellations all play a major role in calculating what seasons we're in, what time of the year we're in, and what months we're in. So it becomes pretty basic once we start to break these things down. Psalms 19, verses 1 through 6, reveals that the luminaries communicate with nature and specifically mentions the heat of the sun, which reveals seasons. The seasons, referring to change of the weather, has to do with the sun's circuit throughout the year. There are 4 points in which the sun travels. Spring, which is the perfect distance from the earth, which allows everything to thaw out from winter and begin to grow. Number 2 is summer, which is when the sun is the closest to the earth. This is when everything on earth begins to bloom fully, and also the time which the light on the earth is the greatest. Then comes fall, when the sun begins to move further away from the earth, causing the weather to become slightly cooler than spring, but not sufficient heat and sun rays to keep everything flourishing. The final point of the sun circuit is the winter, when not only the sun, the furthest away from the earth, but the weather is cold and plants and animals are unable to thrive. Therefore, they migrate or hibernate or sometimes die. This is a pattern of life to remind us of the course of sin and to look forward to restoration of light and life. Another thing that needs to be expressed is the order of the luminaries. We first see revealed in Genesis 1, verses 14 through 18, that Elohim is creating lights in the Shamayim. So the intent of these luminaries is to rule by shining light and indicating what part of the day and month it actually is. The sun begins the day with small amount of light referred to as dawn. In the Hebrew, the word for morning is boker, which means to break the night. Day does not begin until the sun reveals its light, no matter how small the light is. Then, as the day progresses and the sun becomes greater until it reaches its climax, which we call noon, when the sun is directly above us. In the following verse, it shows us a climax of heat and light, which we find in Exodus 16, verses 21, 1 Samuel 11, verse 9, and Nehemiah 7, verse 3. Then the sun moves from the position of the climax, which is noontime and the hottest part of the day. It then begins to decline in heat as well as light, which brings us to the point of the day called even, or in Hebrew, Areb. Areb is a point during the day in which the sun is almost and sometimes not visible, but the light is dimming, causing the shadow to grow dim as well. This cycle is replicated in principle with the moon. The moon does not break the day, but has a cycle of phases which reveals what day of the month it is. The cycle has a similar pattern. Because the moon also is created to be a light, we see the focus of the moon is the phases of light just as the sun. The portion of the moon referred to as Kodesh, or new moon, is a point in time in which the phase of light on the moon renews. This is why the word for the first day of the month is Kodesh, which means to be new or renew. The phases begin with a breaking of darkness, which is the last phase of the moon. Just as the sun breaks the darkness, the moon also breaks the darkness and renews its cycle of light phases every month. So the physical differences between the equilux and the equinox is important because there's a lot of people that are confused and have an understanding of, a flawed understanding, I should say, of really what these two mean and what is it that begins the cycle of renewal, of new life, of coming out of death, out of winter, coming into the spring. It's all part of this grander plan, but I believe the equilux is a sign that precedes the equinox. It's a signal that it's coming. The changing of the seasons is coming. Then that is a sign also that we're to look for the next new moon, if you will, what will begin the year. and that is called Abib. All right, so the physical day on which the sun crosses the equator of the earth, causing the major change of the seasons, whereas the equinox is a relative mathematically calculated, meaning hour analysis, indication of a day when the hours of the daylight and the hours of the night are approximately equal. The only place where we can experience the equinox occurring on the same day as the equinox is if you are a resident of the equator. If you are a resident at different latitudes than the equator, then the occurrence of the equinox varies depending on your degree of latitudinal distance from the equator and whether you are in either the northern or southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, the equinox can occur up to 5 days earlier than the equinox, depending on how far north you are from the equator. And in the southern hemisphere, the equinox can occur up to 5 days after the equinox, depending on how far south you are from the equator. Hanok, or Enoch, as many know, identified that the great sign event of the beginning of the year was the sun moving across the equator and the change of the seasons. Today, we know this event as the vernal equinox. And Hanok identified that along with this astronomical event that marked a point in the circuit of the sun, the Hebrew word tekefa, which is the Hebrew word 8622 in Strong's. It's a general term for a circuit of time, a cycle, and may be applied to the term of a year, a period of a pregnancy, or the ending point of anything such as a day. An associated sign, that of equal day and night hours, also occurred. In this revelation, we see that Hanok is indicating that in his day, the equator was closely positioned in proximity of the covenant land at that time. This is because the occurrence of the equinox is highly dependent on the refractional time, or the refractional of the light on the surface of the earth. The astronomical testimony of creation reveals that there is only one place where the equinox and the equinox occur simultaneously on the same day. That is when one is positioned at the equator. Today, the covenant land is situated at some 40 degrees north of latitude from the equator. Hence, we see the difference in Jerusalem of some 5 days between the early occurrence of the refracted light sign of the equinox, which this year happened on 14th of March, 2018, and to the occasional observable, the real sun, occurred the occurrence of the equinox that happened on the 20th of March this year. So you can see how the equinox predated it, basically, was that 6 days prior to the equinox happening. So it's like a signal, it's a sign to pay attention, something else is going to happen here. The meaning of the Hebrew word tekefa is the circuit of the sun, or the going around, as it understood from the written scripture. The observation of the sun reflecting and the astronomical end and beginning of the earth's annual circuit of the sun is the scriptural term tekefa. It's a term from the astronomy that has entered common use is the equinox, which translated from its Latin roots, roughly meaning equal night. So most people think that the spring, or the vernal equinox, and the fall, or the autumnal equinoxes, are the days when the length of the daylight and the length of the night are equal. It's close, but not quite right. As the days lengthen from winter towards summer, there certainly is a day during which the length of time we see sunlight and the length of the time is dark are roughly the same. Technically, however, the timing of each equinox is defined as the moment when the Earth passes a particular point in its orbit around the sun. It's not defined by the local length of the day. We have extended our imaginations into space and covered it with geometric patterns. One of those patterns is an imaginary circle that runs around the entire sky and is called the ecliptic. This is also the circle that marks the apparent position of the sun throughout each year, relative to the background stars. It's called ecliptic because of its importance in determining the dates of eclipses. for a lunar or a solar eclipse to take place, the sun, the moon, and the earth all have to be in alignment with the ecliptic. Because much of the solar system is a pretty flat configuration, most of what happens in the solar system also happens near the ecliptic. The orbits of the Earth, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and many other things in the solar system lie in more or less the same plane. So when you are able to spot any of the planets, you're seeing approximately where the elliptic line in the sky. Another similar geometric pattern or circle is projected in the sky for practical reasons is defined by the Earth's own equator. Astronomers can plot a line across the sky which corresponds in the up direction to where the equator is on the Earth. If that's a little hard to envision, just consider the North Star, the Polaris. By accident, it sits within a degree of the place in the sky directly above the Earth's North Pole, the rotational pole, not the magnetic pole. From Polaris, the celestial equator is 90 degrees south in all directions. So, two circles projected up into the sky. So picture an orange with two rubber bands around its middle. At the cross, that crosses each other as viewed from the inside. They are tilted with respect to each other by the same amount of the Earth's rotation is tilted relative to the position of the sun, which is around 23 degrees. So each equinox is defined as the time at which the Earth passes the place where the two lines cross. At that moment, the terminator, the place where the sunlit side of the Earth and the night side of the Earth meet, is at right angle to the Earth's equator. Now, you would think that this particular arrangement would mean day and night are of equal length, and geometrically it's true. However, what we actually see is much more complicated. The apparent length, actual length of a daylight and the night differ from place to place on the Earth. One of the big factors is the bending effects of the Earth's atmosphere. See, we sit under an ocean of air, and one of the consequences of our atmosphere is that the light is bent as it comes in from space. Air acts like a huge lens. The closer an object is to the horizon, like the sun at sunset or sunrise, the more bending is apparent. This is because the light at these low angles must pass through much more air to reach us. It acts as a thick lens cover to the horizon. So the consequences of this bending of sunlight is that the time sometimes actually happens in the sky is not necessarily when we see it happening from our vantage point under the atmosphere. In fact, this bending is enough that at the horizon, it's enough to make the sun appear to be more than its own diameter. Earlier in the rising, it would, without the atmosphere there, a staggering thought. When we see the sun just sitting up there on the horizon in the morning, it's actually still below the horizon geometrically. See, the other factor is that apparent size of the sun. From the Earth's perspective, the sun is about a half a degree across compared to the whole 360 degrees of the sky. Sunrise and sunset do not happen instantaneously. Sunrise is defined as the moment that the sun's disk just appears on the horizon for any particular morning. Sunset is defined as the moment when the last bit of the sun just disappears past the horizon from any particular location. See, these two things combined are enough of an effect that the equilux, the day that has equal hours and minutes of sun above and below the horizon, is about 4 days before the vernal equinox and about 4 days after the autumnal equinox. So the timing of the equinox may be different in your location. So we can't really count that as a starting point other than a signal about the equinox coming, which is really when all of the seasonal changes happen, because then you have the constellation of the stars are in the right position for each season as well. So these are all crucial points. And here is another crucial point. The year is an astronomical event determined by the sun, not by the moon. It is the point at which the revelation of the earth around the sun comes to complete its yearly cycle. The sun determines the year, and that returning point is the vernal equinox. So determining Pesach, or Passover, at the beginning of the new year, i.e. after the vernal equinox, then setting Abib first, before the vernal equinox would be allowing Pesach to be in the new year, but setting Abib first before the year's end, i.e. before the circuit of the sun is complete at the vernal equinox. This is still in the winter of the previous year, which is an Abib. This is the reason for the intercalary years, i.e. the addition of the extra months that we find in other calendars, so that the first new month or new moon after the year, the Shaneh, begins, after the vernal equinox, that is the month of Abib. Thus, Abib is of the year and the beginning of months, not the beginning of the year, but it's the very first month of the year. See, the Gregorian calendar is part of the problem here. Is Julius Caesar, who accepted January 1st as the beginning of the civil year, or Hillel III, who changed Abib calculations, or Pope Gregory, who said January 1st as the beginning of the year, and Easter according to Hillel's unscriptural changes? The arbiters of time. Starting the year on the first day of the first month is an inheritance from pagan Rome, both civical and eschatological. And it's influenced by Hillel's Talmudic changes to ancient scriptural practices. See, these changes made Abib first completely dependent on Pesach, rather than having Pesach dependent on Abib. For example, if the spring equinox is to fall on March 20th, then Abib can't be any earlier than March 7th. Why? Isn't it because Pesach is first calculated and must be in a new year? Absolutely. If then the vernal equinox marks the beginning of the Shaneh, or the year, then why is Pesach calculated first in relation to the new year, to determine which month is Abib? This is just wrong. It shouldn't be hard to understand that the great light that determines years is the sun, because years are made of days and the sun obviously is involved. Nowhere does Scripture mark the beginning of the year with the moon. The year begins from spring to spring, or from vernal equinox to vernal equinox. Now, here's one thing I want to clarify before I move on from here, because there's some misunderstanding of this, I believe, is because we look at the beginning of a year as like a start point, where it starts and it ends, or ends and it starts. I believe that the way that the Father has set this up is with the signs that show us something. So we have the vernal equinox is a sign that the equinox is coming. Then the equinox gives us a sign to begin to look for this new month of the new year that comes after the vernal equinox. That's when that's when the clock really begins to start. So there's this seasonal change, if you will. Instead of when the year begins, it's the beginning of the year. But then when that first month happens, then we start our counting of that year. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that brings a little confusion. There's some that have a little different beliefs about these things. And hopefully through all of this, we'll get a clearer understanding. So the year begins from spring to spring, vernal equinox to vernal equinox. There can only be one Abib first. That's that first day of the first month of the year. And therefore, there can only be one Pesach per year. So the first new month or new moon after the vernal equinox is the new month or new moon of Abib. Remember, the Torah shall go forth from Jerusalem. So the law of the new months or the new moons, as well as many believe the barley harvest, which there's some scriptural truth to the barley required for the wave sheet offering and such, but I don't necessarily believe that that's a calculator, even though it's a sign of that we're in the right seasons. So also, so all of these things should also be set from the same location, and will be when the Mashiach returns, everything will be established from Jerusalem. So that is where we have to start our calculations from, in my opinion, because that's where everything goes forth from. That's his chosen city, and therefore everything, the law or the Torah, goes forth from that point. So let's take a look at Yahuah's set-apart calendar. Yahuah plainly says that we are to use both the sun and the moon for determining the days, feasts, and years. Those who truly love Yahuah will not blatantly disregard Yahuah's Kodesh word. Genesis 1:14, and Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the Shamayim to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years." These lights, more corresponding to the sun, the moon, and the stars, which also we know them as the constellations. The question is, how are they used? We know that they all are to be used, but how are they used? How does this determine what points in time in the year we are? An in-depth examination of the above highlighted words will help make the meaning a little bit clearer for us. Let's take a look at signs. It means indicate a sign or a beacon from the Strong's number 226, the oath, and probably also from the H225 in the sense of appearing, a signal, literally or figuratively, as a flag, a beacon, an omen, a monument, a prodigy, evidence, etc. Mark, a miracle, a sign, also as a token. The next word is seasons. It indicates a returning point or a gathering point from the Strong's 4150, Moed, which we find in Chronicles 8, verse 13. A Moed from the H3259, properly an appointment, i.e. a fixed time or a season, specifically a festival, conveniently a year, by implication an assembly, as convened for a definite purpose, technically the congregation, by extension the place of meeting, also a signal, as appointed beforehand, appointed as a sign or a time, a place of, a solemn assembly or a congregation, a set or solemn feast, appointed, or a due, it's in the season, a solemn synagogue or a set time that is appointed. Next, let's take a look at days, which is Strong's 3117, Yom, for an unused root meaning to be hot, a day, as the warm hours, whether lit from the sunrise to sunset or from one sunset to the next, or figuratively a space of time defined by an associated term, often used as an adjective, age plus always plus chronicles, continually or daily, its birth, each or 2 day, now a 2 days agone, an elder or extend, the evening, forever, lasting or more, exful, or life as long as you live, even now, old or outlived, or prospectively, presently, remaineth, required, as a season, sense of space, then it's processed of time, as at other times. In trouble, whether as when, as the within a while, that whole year, or younger. That's a whole lot of things to try to say. And then finally we get to the years. 8141, Shaneh, in the plural only, Shaneh. It comes from the H8138, and it means a year. It's a revolution of time. It's a whole age long or old or year. A year with 365 and a quarter days equals 365 days. 8,760 hours plus 5 hours and 49 minutes and 12 seconds. That's according to what man has calculated the day to be. Now, there's some contention that a year has only got 364 days or 354 4 days or something like that. I forget what the number is exactly, but there's so many calculations. So therefore, we need to examine the months by using the moons as consistently in its phases, as well as the constellations, as well as the sun. It tells us each and every day to start our count all over again. So, with all that said, we're going to look at this a little bit deeper, because there's a wide range of meanings for the words individually used, as you can see. But when used together in a certain ways, the choices become more focused for us. So in the case of Genesis 1:14, it is clear that the sun and the moon and the stars or the constellations are working in harmony for the establishing of the yearly cycle, as well as the various seasons and the annual Kodesh days or appointed times. That certainly includes determining Shaneh, years, as well as Moed, appointed times, which is also a time of assemblage or gathering for us. And that's really what this study is for, because we want to try to all be on the same page and understand that we're worshiping, hopefully at the same time and for the same purposes. Hallelujah. So, what determines when a new year begins? We must remember that there are 3 things to observe. 1, the sun. 2, the moon. And the 3rd is the stars, or the constellations. So as Yahuah set his calendar to begin in the spring, according to Exodus 12, verses 1 and 2, the vernal equinox is regarded as the beginning of the year. The days when then begin to grow longer, and the earth stirs to life, and a new year begins. Exodus 12:2 says, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." The first, or Chodesh, new cycle of life of the year. It will be in the beginning of Chodesh. Through the seasons or sun circuits began in its its new phases, the beginning starts when the moon begins its phases. Therefore, until the sun and the moon begin their new phases together, that's when it will be considered a new or renewed yearly cycle. So the year needs both components. The stars, I believe, are also in a new position as well. I'm just not as fluent with breaking down the stars at this point. But I know that they have to be in a certain position at certain times of the year, at certain seasons of the year, if you will, as well. So these are all important for us to understand. Exodus 12:2 says Abib is the beginning of months. It doesn't say it is the beginning of the year, but only that it is the first month of the year. Generally denotes belonging to rather than any sense of initiation. This is easily seen in phases such as the face of the deep, the ruach of Elohim, the faces of the water, the firmament of the shamayim, etc., where the subject is connected to the object of the preposition. So this should be understood in the sense that the month of the year belongs to the year. Since months are lunar and lunar observances and years are solar observances, it is easily seen that lunar months do not determine solar years. What then is a year? Did the Hebrews know what a year was? Of course they did, because they observed the seasons changing. They observed the lights in the Shamayim. See, there is a beginning and the ending of the year, as we see in Deuteronomy 11:12. A land which Yahuah your Elohim cares for. The eyes of Yahuah your Elohim are always upon it, from the beginning of the year even until the end of the year. It should be seen that there is a definite beginning of Shaneh, or the year. There is a definite ending of a Shaneh, or a year. Abib is not mentioned as the beginning of Shaneh, or the year. There is nothing to connect Kodesh or months to this determining of Shaneh, of the year. The fact that Abib is not even mentioned in connection with the beginning and the ending of the year is highly significant. Had Abib first actually been the beginning of the year, i.e. Shaneh, all ambiguity would be easily erased. Therefore, Shaneh is not determined by Kodesh, by months. What is seen, however, is that while Abib is the beginning, or Rosh, of the months, Kodesh, it is not the beginning of the year, the Shaneh. Ezekiel also indicates that the marking time of the yearly cycle places the first month after the beginning of the year. Ezekiel 41. In 5 and 20th years of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month. Clearly, the beginning of the year identifies the time period of the beginning of the first month. Thus, the first month could not be at the beginning of the year, i.e. before the vernal equinox. It has to be after that great sign and the changing of the seasons happen for that to be the case. So historically, evaluations of the ancient calendars have broken down a lot of insights of where these ancient Babylonians and the Sumerian times, the vernal equinox marked the beginning of the year. And the early Hebrews also borrowed this system. They all understood the same calculations. They looked at the vernal equinox. When the sun enters the northern hemisphere, about around March 21st, but it's usually between the 19th and the 22nd this happens, and when there is approximately equal amounts of day and night, what we find referenced in John 11:9. From an astrological viewpoint, this time is when the sun is in the constellation Aries. And Aries, the sign of Aries, is an astronomical division of time corresponding to about March 20th to 21st to April 19th to the 20th. The first sign of the zodiac, if you will. The first on or after the vernal equinox. So this constellation of signs that we know as Aries has to be after the vernal equinox for us to enter into this time of spring. So that's another of where the constellations of the stars come in. So while the Hebrews didn't possess a highly developed astronomical calendar of their own, they were familiar with the calendars of those around them, making them knowledgeable of certain astronomical regularities, such as the equinox and the solstice. Now, of course, there was the high priests that were in charge of monitoring and following these signs to determine when the calendars happen. And I believe that they understood all of these signs that we're discussing today. Therefore, they could understand it and they could determine it, and therefore they could declare when this time was coming. Hallelujah. So while the Hebrews didn't possess a highly developed astronomical calendar of their own, they were familiar with the calendars of those around them, making them knowledgeable of certain astronomical regularities, such as the equinox and the solstice. Although it is obvious from numerous Tanakh passages that the ancient Hebrews possessed at least a roughly calculated calendar or calendars, they have nowhere given us a complete account of their system. It was the highly developed astronomical and calendrical science of the Babylonians which opened the way for a more accurate and refined calendar among the Hebrews. Only thing is they had a little bit twisted because they believed in the moon instead of the whole circuit of the sun, moon, and the stars. So that's where they got off track with that. With the lunar solar calendar, in all likelihood, the early Israelites followed a Canaanite calendar. Calendars combine both solar and lunar reckoning, were, however, widely used throughout the Near East, even in very ancient times. And the Hebrews probably always had a lunar solar calendar. The Babylonians gave Semitic names to the months, but in most other respects, this calendar was substantially the Sumerian calendar of Nippur, who observed in the third dynasty of Ur, which was during the time of CA of 2180 through 1960 BCE. See, this calendar reckoned the year from one vernal equinox to the next, while counting months from new moon to new moon, with an added month when this was needed to make up the discrepancies. Now, see, we found that this year, by following the moon and all of these calculations, that automatically, by us following this and looking for the new moon after the vernal equinox, automatically added a 13th month to the calendar, which is basically auto-correcting itself. So it's doing this in its own circuits and movements throughout the year. So we don't need to add months and days to our calendar to make things line back up if we just follow what they're trying to line up to. Hallelujah. So the year, it's a fairly certain that in historical times, the Israelites determined their year not by fluctuating agricultural or pastoral cycles, even though these natural phenomena must have influenced them deeply, but by observing the annual circuits of the stars and the sun. We do know that the new year begins at one of the equinoxes, at the dividing point between winter and summer, or between summer and winter. The Babylonians chose the vernal equinox as the beginning of their year, since spring is the time of new growth. The Hebrews, however, appeared to have observed at different periods two new year dated, one at the spring and another at the autumn equinox. But it is striking that, however, the Hebrew months are mentioned by number, and this is the predominant method used in the Tanakh. They are always counted from the first month in the spring. It was the observation of the vernal equinox, the demarcation between winter and spring, which signals the beginning of the new year. Thus, the new moon was the beginning months of Abib, thus always occurring in the spring. So if the 12th month of the vernal equinox fell early enough to allow another new moon to occur before the vernal equinox, it necessitated adding a 13th month and waiting until the vernal equinox was observed as the beginning of spring and the new year. This addition of an intercalary month always kept the first month of the year on or after the vernal equinox. So how was it determined? It was determined by observation. Since intercalaries of calendars cause the vernal equinox varies as much as 4 days, it was impossible to establish the new moon of Abib prior to the equinox, because of the possibility of misjudging the equinox and having Pesach before it. When there are deviations from this method of reckoning, the beginning of Abib, there arises confusion and conflict, and we see that everywhere. Eusebius wrote of the mathematician Antiochus of Alexandria, condemnation of the changed Hebrew calendar. Hence, also, those that place the first month of Abib in Pisces, i.e. before the vernal equinox, and that fix the 14th of the month by it, commit, as we thought, no little and no common blunder. But neither is this our opinion only, but it was also known to the Hebrews anciently and before the Mashiach, and was chiefly observed by them, as we may learn from Philo, Josephus, and Mosius, and not only from these, but also from those still more ancient, i.e. the two Agaboti. Excuse me on the pronunciation of these words. My tongue don't twist that well anymore. But it's commonly called the Master, and of Artiobus, that most distinguished scholar, who was one of the 70 that translated the scriptures from the Hebrew. These say that all ought to sacrifice the Passover alike after the vernal equinox, in the middle of the first month. It wasn't just whether the Pesach should fall after the vernal equinox, but whether the new moon of Abib came before or after the vernal equinox. Antiochus said that at the time of the Mashiach and before, the new moons of Abib was never allowed to occur before the vernal equinox. Once deviating from this scriptural directive, it then became possible to observe Pesach before the vernal equinox unless other rules were created. So regarding the use of a calendar during the scriptural period, the Jewish Encyclopedia says, rested purely on the observation of the sun and the moon. Note that in determining the calendrical positioning, both the sun and the moon are observed. This is also determined by the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, Volume 1, page 541. Speaking of the original or the pre-exilic method of determining their calendar. They rested on observation merely. In the first period, the priest determined the beginning of each month by the appearance of the new moon and the recurrence of the prescribed feasts from the vernal and autumnal equinoxes. So while the Hebrew civil year may have had to do with the vernal equinox, it was the scriptural new year which was determined from the vernal or the spring equinox. So think about it. Would Yahuah have the second month being the first month, first of the new month, or the new moon after the beginning of the new year? With regards to the year, the Hebrew historian Josephus stated that Israel had 2 new years. The commercial new year, which began in the fall, in the 7th month, which happens to be the most Kodesh month in the Hebrew calendar, and a religious new year, which began in the spring, or the 1st month. And that's according to the biblical versus the Jewish calendar, page 22. See, note that the religious new year begins in the spring, not the winter. Thus, the first month begins after the year begins, i.e. after the vernal equinox, which marks the beginning of spring. Abib is the beginning of months, which occurs in the spring, i.e. after the vernal equinox of the new year. Yahuah said to observe. When man attempted to calculate, he has changed Yahuah's rules, then becomes confused, usurping Yahuah's authority and leadership. The simple observation of the vernal equinox, which signals the change of seasons and ushers in the beginning of the new year, which begins on the first new month of new moon of the month of Yahuah's sacred calendar, or his set-apart calendar. Each and every new year this happens. So if the calculation could not be achieved with absolute accuracy, then observance was the only guarantee. So anyone with a rudimentary knowledge of the sundial can easily determine the vernal equinox because it is easily observable. Calculating the event in advance, however, does not take considerably more mathematical skills. When the vernal equinox is observed, the next new moon begins Abib. It's pretty simple when you put it to those terms. The sincere seeker of truth will follow Yahuah's directives. First, the equinox is observed, then the new month, or the new moon, is observed. We must remember that today it is possible to calculate with exact precision both the vernal equinox and the new month, or the new moon. But the calculated new moon can be a day in advance of the visible new moon. So new moon observers have no problem with disregarding the scientifically calculated new moon in favor of the visible sighted new moon. Why can't the same procedures be used for the vernal equinox? Or is it that human reasoning is interfering with Yahuah's scriptural directives? That's the question. In the YMCA publication, Biblical versus Jewish Calendar, it is observed that it was during the era of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which happened in circa 132 to 135 CE, that the proper calendar dates of the vernal feast were in question. It was at this time that the Hebrew calendar underwent a change. This change was the abandonment of Yahuah's command to use the lights for determining years. Thus, the observed vernal equinox in relation to determining Yahuah's scriptural first month, permitting the new month or the new moon of Abib to occur during the winter of the previous year. So you have 2 new moons of Abib occurring within the same solar year, and then no new moon of Abib in the following year. That causes a major problem. See, the ancient Hebrews could only have celebrated the season after the equinox. Why? Because they were correctly observing the vernal equinox to determine the changing of seasons at the beginning of the year, and maintaining the proper monthly order of a single Abib first per solar year. There's only one Abib first, or the first of Abib per solar year. We can't have 2. If you have 2, there's something wrong with your calendar. It is recognized that the calendar followed during the time of Yahushua HaMashiach, or the Messiah, was regulated by the priestly lineage, the Sadducees, who scrupulously adhered to the vernal or after the vernal equinox reckoning of Abib. For proof, please refer to when is the new moon of Abib and the real Passover, page 14. Excuse me. The Shamayim declares all of this. It declares all this reckoning to us if we'll just pay attention to what it's showing us. See, the scriptures themselves point to the combination of the heavenly bodies for the establishment of appointed times, as we have previously seen in Genesis 1:14. We see also in the Psalms 19 that there is more to determine the proper observation of time than just the new moon. Psalms 119, verses 1 through 6. To the chief musician, a psalm of David. The Shamayim declare the esteem of Elohim, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night shows knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is going out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them has he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is the bridegroom coming out of his chambers, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the Shamayim, and his circuit until the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The question of exactly what the connection is between the times and the seasons may well be understood in the terms for line, which connotes a connection, and certainty would include more than a simple sunset, sunrise repetition, particularly in the light that is their line, the line of the Shamayim and the firmaments, not just the line of the sun. While the daily rotation of the earth provided the smaller connecting circuits, the returning of the sun each year to the same point at the vernal equinox was the greater connecting circuit. From the earliest times, there was an understanding of the geometry of the earth, and that the sun, in its transit across the equator line, created the equinoxes. This astronomical event precludes any artificial made-man directives. Therefore, we got to return back to those directives to be able to establish the calendar correctly. So, is observing the new moon of Abib in relation to the vernal equinox a mistake? First of all, the vernal equinox does not determine the Pesach. A fundamental problem that arises concerning the determination of the Pesach or the Passover is that the sun determines the length of a year, completing its circuit at the vernal equinox, and has nothing to do with any direct determination of Pesach or Passover. Tekufa is the Hebrew word 8622. We talked about this earlier. It's a general term for the circuit of time. It's a cycle and may be applied to the term of a year, a period of a pregnancy, or the ending point of anything, such as a day. The term is used in a variety of ways, as you can see at Exodus 34:22, Psalms 19, verse 6, and 1 Samuel 1:20. The tekufa, or a revolution, or a course, a circuit, shows that there is a defining beginning and ending point of determining the measurement of a year in relation to the sun, according to Psalms 19, verse 6. Therefore, there must be a single astronomical event that marks this event and can be readily observed. We also know that this event has a connection to the months of green years, i.e. Abib, which occurs in spring. Therefore, the completing of the sun cycle in the spring does have a direct effect on determining the first month of Abib. This astronomical event is what we call, again, the vernal equinox. So understand that it is not the definition of the vernal equinox or the spring equality that determines anything, but the observance of the completion of the sun circuit that marks the beginning and the ending of the year. To insist that the vernal equinox determines the Pesach rather than the new month of Abib creates total confusion. Confusion is also created when insisting that the new moon nearest the vernal equinox is the only criteria for establishing the beginning of a month. The mistake of the early Pesach is easily seen when the new moon closest to the vernal equinox is evident. A prime example is in 1981, where the vernal equinox is reported to be at 12:03 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on March 20th, according to the Farmer's Almanac. This would place the Pesach on March 29th. So let us ask the question, if Abib, i.e. the moon, not the sun, determines the beginning of the year, how do we know? What is the focal point of making that determination? Green ears notwithstanding. Let me see if we understand this correctly. First, we must determine the equinox, then Abib, and the date of Pesach to see whether the Pesach might fall before or after the equinox. See, this shows us which new moon is closer to the equinox. If the Pesach falls after the equinox, then the new moon of Abib must be the new moon closest to the equinox. But if the Pesach would occur on or before the equinox, then it would be too early, and the new moon after the equinox would then become the new month or the new moon of Abib. So we first discover Pesach or Passover in relation to the equinox, then we set Abib by it. Or the shorter version, first we must determine the equinox and calculate which new moon is closest to the equinox without placing the Pesach before the equinox. And the one closest to the equinox, allowing the Pesach to be after the equinox, will be the new moon of Abib. The confusion is easily swept away when we understand. What heavenly lights are used in determining a year, that is the sun, is used for signs, including astronomical events, the division of seasons, that incorporates a full year. So what is the astronomical event determining the beginning and the ending of the year? That would be the vernal equinox. So what heavenly light is used to determine a month? That would be the moon. So what is the astronomical event determining the beginning of the month? The first visible sighting in Jerusalem of a new moon. It ought to be apparent that the lights, referring to luminations, therefore a visible lunar sighting is what is seen for establishing a new month, or a new moon, if you will. There can never be any question or confusion regarding an early Pesach if the first new moon after the vernal equinox is the new moon of Abib. Moreover, there is also no question whether there will be grains of barley for the wave sheet offering by always keeping Abib first after the vernal equinox, because this always places the barley season in its proper place. And we'll discuss the barley a little bit down further. Those that place the first month of Abib in Aries, the zodiacal sign before the equinox, now which is now Pisces, and then fixes the 14th month of that month by it, commit no little and no common blunder, according to what we read earlier. But neither is this my opinion only, but it was also known of the Hebrews anciently and before the Mashiach, and was chiefly observed by them, as we learn from Philo, Josephus, and Mukibus. I wish I could say these names better. I apologize. But you know what they are. You see them. And not only from these, but from those ancients. The two, Agathibus, who was one of the 70 that translated the scriptures from the Hebrew. So note, at the time this was written, Aries was in the position that Pisces holds today, which is around February 20th to March 20th. The displacement, which now places Aries after the equinox, is due to the astronomical phenomenon called the precession of the equinoxes. So understanding that the ancients had an understanding that Abib 1 always fell after the vernal equinox is crystal clear. The debate of when Pesach and the Feast of Unleavened Breads were properly kept hinges on this single event. Peter, the bishop of Alexandria, mentions that the Hebrews had kept the Pesach, or the Passover, properly up to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. But after the destruction of the city, their error in reckoning the beginning of the month, which is first amongst the months of the year, on the 14th day of which being accurately observed after the equinox. The ancients celebrated the Pesach or the Passover according to the divine command, whereas the men of the present day now celebrate it before the equinox, and that altogether through the negligence and the error, being ignorant how they celebrate it in their seasons. Ante-Nicene Fathers, Volume 1, page 280, it references that. So, this required the visible new moon to at least coincide with the equinox. Therefore, the inclusion of the equinox as a valid reference point in determining either a before or after Pesach is evidence of the critical importance. The plain and simple truth of the scriptures is that once the year begins, being determined by the vernal equinox, the next visible new moon of Abib first, and then the 14th day of Pesach after that. Hallelujah? That's simple. So, but there is problems with intercalculation. The calculation of months was from a newly observed crescent moon to the next newly observed crescent moon, a varying period of about 29 to 31 days. I found it as more closer to 29 to 30 days, actually. With the calculated new moon occurring about every 29 and a quarter days. This eventually created about an 11-day shortage per year, or approximately 33 days every 3 years. This meant the insertion of an additional 13th month periodically to prevent the fixed feast from rotating around the calendar. This also brings us to the fact that you cannot have, at this time in history, a perfect 12-month calendar. Scripture never specifically says that there's 12 months. So to restrict Yahuah's calendar to our numbering is not scriptural. Many also observe this with the day of first fruits. Although many say it occurs on the 16th of the first month, it says it says it's the day after the Sabbath and does not give a specific date. But it still fits perfectly within the count and timing of the Feast of Weeks. Likewise, the calendar is not restricted to 12 months, nor does it have 13. It simply must stay with the timing of the season revealed by the circuit of the sun. Hallelujah. So again, we trust the circuit of the lights that are given for us for the calculation of years, months, and even days. The Gregorian added 5 days, and now their calendar is 365.555 days, and every 4 years is an added day to line up with the months with their pagan seasons, such as Easter and the Yule Tidings, a season from end of November to January 1st. The Hanuk calendar has, according to many, 364 days, which is every few years needs to readjust to line up with the seasons once again, but it can't. Perhaps Hanuk's calendar changed due to the flood. Prophetically, every month is a perfect 30 days, leaving a prophetic year to be 360, which is a perfect time, may be possible, but just by observing the moon, we see it's not a perfect 30 days every month. But our Father, in his perfect desire for us to understand, gave us a method within seasons that I believe only existed since sin. As if he knew the luminaries would be affected by either the course of Adam or the flood, that he designed the seasons to keep us in perfect alignment with his appointed times. Intercalculation. As had been mentioned above, a cycle of 12 lunar months, or 354 and a quarter, falls short of the solar year 365 and a quarter. It is obvious, therefore, that in any lunar solar calendar, there has to be a system of intercalculation by which the shortage of more than 11 days can be adjusted. The Babylonians inserted an extra month every 2 or 3 years, whenever observation showed it to be needed. And this also became the method used by the Hebrews. Because the spring, or the Pesach, the Matzah festival, beginning the cycle of agricultural feasts, needed to be kept at a set time in the year. It could be understood why the intercalculary months came to be inserted after Adar, the last month before the beginning of spring. We, Adar and Adar, it's mentioned in the rabbinic custom set, this is to be 7 out of every 19 years they do this. So it was necessary to peg the beginning of months to a solar event to keep the months in their correct time. Without doing so, there would be no way to determine when the new year began, causing a regression of months through the seasons. So where should the new moon be observed? What if a person lives in an area where the new moon can't be seen? Should there be confusion with some observing one day and others another? This would mean different Pesachs and different high days, and for days of unleavened bread in many localities. Plus, it could also mean different fall feast days as well. Should there be confusion over this? Of course not. I don't believe so. For Elohim is not the author of confusion, but of shalom, as in all assemblies of the believers, according to 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33. The solution is simple. Where does Yahuah say his Torah shall be administered from? And many people shall go and say, come you, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahuah, to the house of Elohim of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of Yahuah from Jerusalem. Yeshayahu, or Isaiah 2, verse 3. And many nations shall come and say, come, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahuah, and to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the Torah shall go forth out of Zion, and the word of Yahuah from Jerusalem. Micah 4:2. If we correctly observe scriptures, we will understand that the Torah, or the laws pertaining to the Kodesh days, and hence the new moon, or new month observances, are set from Jerusalem, not from our heart, or wherever someone happens to be. Yahuah has chosen Jerusalem, according to 1 Kings 11:36, 2 Kings 21:7, 2 Chronicles 6:6, Zechariah 3:2. And even though he has temporarily turned his back on his people, thus fulfilling 2 Kings 23:27, make no mistake, when Yahusha returns, he will return to rule the earth from Jerusalem. This clearly shows that everyone is expected to be observing the same new months or new moons and the same Kadosh days that Yahusha is observing. If it will be wrong to set the Torah from every locality after he returns, it is wrong to do so before he returns, I would believe. Observing Yahuah's Torah correctly means not being wrong when he returns. Today, it seems that every person is right in his own eyes or his own locality. So the observance to Yahuah's command to observe the lights, including the sun, not just the new moons, provides the solution to the problem, thus creating shalom. Another factor many want to put into this is barley. But there's also a different thought about this. The barley is important to some degrees for the wave sheet offering, as we've seen in Scripture. But when they came out of Mitzrayim, or out of Egypt, that's where they were really looking and observing this. That's when it was first mentioned. And therefore, there's some that believe that there's something to that as well. So I look at it as it needs to line up in the right season so that the harvest can be there for the wave sheet offering, which fulfills what Scripture says. So I believe it's part of this also. So while one may make an argument for the green ears of barley, a careful study of the Palestinian barley growing cycle and what is necessary for the wave sheet offering reveals that the barley harvest always began after April 4th and as late as early May, except, of course, in the years of drought when there may be no barley to harvest. But I imagine that would make it rather difficult to find green ears to begin Abib, wouldn't it? So no green ears, no Abib. The opposite problem may also occur. That would be an unusually warm winter and unseasonably early rains that might cause green ears to occur in late February or early March. How would one determine green ears in February? Well, let's look at the barley harvest. In determining the month of Abib, we must understand a few things about the ancient agricultural practices pertaining to barley. When was barley planted and harvested? And were the ancient Israelites harvesting barley in early to mid-March? The Semitic name was derived from the word for hair, probably because of the long awns which project from the seeds to form the characteristics bear-like heads. Barley ripened early. It ripens earlier than wheat does, according to Exodus 9:31. So the barley harvest began as early as late April, especially in the lowlands, according to Joshua 3:15, or early May, preceding the wheat harvest by 2 weeks, according to Ruth 2:23. So the beginning of the barley harvest was marked by the bringing in of the first fruits as a consecration of the harvest, according to Leviticus 23:10. So the agriculture of that time, the Israelite farmers could look forward to a hot, dry season from the middle of May to the middle of October. It, i.e. wheat, was planted in the fall when the winter rains had started, sometime in late October to early November, and harvested in May to June. Barley was also widely grown, but may have been at times considered a second-class food. Barley was planted at about the same time as the wheat, but harvested about a month earlier. So by reckoning the first new moon after the vernal equinox to be the new moon of Abib, the ancient Israelites were always in harmony with the seasons, as well as having sufficient grains of barley for the wave sheet offering during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And scriptural references prove it. Exodus 9:31, and the flux and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flux was bold. We should note that the etymology of the word barley indicates something coarse or rough. This would be a mature plant rather than a green sprout. We can look at the Strong's 8184, Sarah. And it's feminine, it means the plant, and the masculine means the grain. Also, Seror, from the H8175 in a sense of roughness, barley as vilos, barley. The term in the ear also denotes grain as well as ears, as shown in Strong's exhaustive coordinates of the Bible. Abib, from an unused root, means to be tender, i.e. green, or a young ear of grain. Hence the name of the month Abib or Nisan, Abib, ear, green ears of corn. Exodus 12 verse 2, Yahuah points out that Abib is to be the beginning of months. Exodus 12:2, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Deuteronomy 16:1, observe the month of Abib and keep the Pesach unto Yahuah your Elohim, for in the month of Abib, Yahuah your Elohim brought you forth out of Mitzrayim by night. Shamar, or observe, has the general connotation of protecting from the Strong's 8104. Shamar is to hedge about as with thorns, to guard, generally to protect or to attend to, etc. Beware, be circumspect, take heed to self, keep yourself, or mark, look narrowly, observe, preserve, regard, reserve, or save yourself, sure, that lay, or wait for, or watch, man. While Exodus 12:2 states that it is both the head month and the first month, it doesn't say it is the determining of the yearly cycle itself. Abib is the head month because of its importance in determining the proper sequence for the annual Kodesh Sabbaths. In addition, it is the first month of the year in the yearly cycle. The importance of correctly preserving the month of Abib cannot be underestimated. What is it that we should guard and protect about this very important month of the year? We find that in Exodus 23:15. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you, in the time appointed of the month Abib. For in it you came out of Mizraim, and none shall appear before me empty. Exodus 13:4, as well as 34:18, and Deuteronomy 16, verse 1. Leviticus is even plainer in its language. Leviticus 2, verse 14. And if you offer a meat offering of your first fruits unto Yahuah, you shall offer for the meat offering of thy first fruit green ears of corn, dried by the fire, even corn beaten out of full ears. Plainly, there is sufficient mature grain in the green ears, i.e., Abib, to be beaten out of full ears, i.e., the mature pods. The account of Ruth and Naomi also confirm the fact that green ears is a mature and ripened grain. Ruth 1:22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. Ruth 2, verses 2 through 3. And Ruth the Moabite said unto Naomi, Let us now go to the fields, the glean ears of corn, after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the fields after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the kindred of Amalek. Ruth 2:17. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out that she had gleaned, and it was about the ephah of barley. Ruth 2:23. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and dealt with her mother-in-law. Ruth 3, verse 2. And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maiden you waste? Behold, he winnows barley tonight in the threshing floor. Ruth 3, verses 15 through 17. Also he said, Bring the veil that you hast upon you, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her. And she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, Who are you, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, These 6 measures of barley gave he me, for he said to go. Go not empty until your mother-in-law. It is clearly evident that what was being harvested in the beginning of the barley harvest was fully matured grain that required winnowing. We should also be reminded that the usual barley harvest occurred in late April and early May. This is evidently one of the things we are to be carefully guarding. Can there be a month of green ears in the winter? I don't think so. So understanding that Abib cannot occur in winter before the year has ended always makes Abib the first month of the year, falling in the spring. So having Abib before the equinox, i.e. in the winter, and sometimes places 2 Abibs in one point to the 365-day yearly cycle or solar cycle, followed by a year with no Abibs with the same solar period, negates Exodus 12:2, which indicates Abib is always the first month of the year. That is, in one year, there will be an Abib in spring, after the equinox, and again in winter, before the yearly cycle is completed. But in the next solar year cycle, yearly cycle, there will be no Abibs at all because the winter Abib began that year, but does not conclude until the 13th month after the next solar year or cycle in the next spring. This also shows that fixed intercalary reckoning without regards to the sun determining the seasons and the yearly cycles cannot be relied upon with certainty. So proper intercalculation of the set-apart calendar. And this is a summary. Yahuah's word states that his law or his Torah is administered from Jerusalem, and that observing the new month of Abib is part of the Torah, or the law. The sun marks the beginning of the year, the Shaneh, at the vernal equinox. Number 2, if the new month of Abib always follows the equinox, the barley is harvested well after the sun enters Aries, i.e. the vernal equinox, March 21st, basically. Then the harvest is assured to produce grain by April 3rd. The earliest date for Pesach. because the barley is in the ear, i.e. kerneled, at the time of the new moon after the equinox. It is the month of Abib. Number 3, the earliest possibility that the wave sheet offering could be held would be the 15th of Abib, when Pesach or Passover would occur. All nations are to observe Yahuah's set-apart time as he determines, which is not justified for local conditions. Number 5, therefore, concern our Pesach being too early, too late, at the wrong time of the year, or not at all is totally eliminated if the new moon of the Abib occurs when the sun is in Aries, i.e. after the vernal equinox, and the sighting is from Jerusalem, Yahuah's chosen city. So using these parameters, we also will also allow us to be on time for the fall feast that also happens around the autumn equinox. Thus, it is important to be aware and have a better understanding of Yahuah's calendar. Now, I'm going to pull up some of these calendars. I'm only going to show you a couple of them that are important to us right now. First is the March 21st, which this is when we seen on the 14th. We had the Equinox, which at the equator would give us equal day and equal night. After that, we had a conjunction moon. Then I believe the new moon or the sighting after the conjunction comes forth. Then we had the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, which happened on March 20th. Then I want to look at April. Since this is the month of Abib for this year, and this is how it came out. This is the first conjunction moon after the vernal equinox. Therefore, the day after, I believe, is the first day of the month, of the first month. And it's also confirmed by the sliver that's being sighted that night of the first day. So this, looking at it this way, will always help us keep in line those that observe the day beginning at night, or those that are like myself that observe it from the daybreak. So the daybreak after the conjunction, I believe, is day 1, and that's confirmed by the sliver that night. Then we can begin to start our count from that point all the way until we get to the 14th. Actually, the 10th is another day where we get when they were to get the lambs. And then on the 14th is when that lamb was slaughtered and offering. Then the 15th is a full moon, which it always is going to be a full moon on the 15th, according to the calendar in the Shamayim. And that's when we can start our Feast of Unleavened Bread. I think the next important one, I believe, is July 1st, which, according to this, July 1st is Shavuot, day 50 of the count of Omer. I believe that is the day what we call Pentecost, and known by Pentecost. Then, of course, we still have the same alignment of the phases of the moon, so we can determine that first day of that month. Now, for our fall feast, which is coming up here also, that we're all trying to plan for, I want to go to October. As we can see, this is a very important month here. In fact, it's the most Kadosh month in the Hebrew calendar for many reasons. But as we can see how these phases of the moon line up, this is what the feast, then no one knows the day or the hour, basically. Until we see that crescent, we know that conjunction moon has happened, and that first crescent that happens that next day, that begins that 10th day. So that's really on the 10th of that month of October is when that feast begins. And that is the first day of the 7th month. which is known as Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets. That is a high Sabbath. That's why it's important that we can see these calendars and be able to follow this and try to be close as we can to be on, so that we can observe when this happens, so that we can be accurate for the rest of the month feast. So if we continue on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all the way down until we get to the 10th day of this month, of the 7th month, which is our second high feast day, Yom Kippur. Day of Atonement is known also. Then as we can see, as we continue on, this is the day that we all are looking for, that the Feast of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, which everyone is going to try to gather upon. According to this calendar, it would be on the 24th of October. Then you have your 7 days of tabernacling, and then on the 8th day is another high Sabbath. So we can see the importance of these calendars and how everything lines up and shows us the signs that we need to see to be able to pay attention to when do these months start. Because if you're not starting and you're not paying attention, you're not going to be on the right time. And these are appointed times. And that's the reason that it's so important for us to really look at the importance of a calendar, because if they're appointed times, that means that we're supposed to be on time. And we're supposed to be observing these feasts on the day that they are, because just like the Sabbath is a very Kodesh, set apart day for us, and we understand the importance of it, those that are observing it, we understand that it's very different. It's a completely set apart day. These are the same, and there's the barakas that are contained within these set apart times, these appointed times. For one, we get to be able to be in the presence of our Father again, and to be able to be in alignment with what He's called us to do, and when He's called us to do them, so that we are able to receive what Baraka is contained in these days. And they're also a big sign. All of these feast days are a sign of Mashiach. When He first came, which we got in the feast, the first feast that we have with Pesach and Passover, and what that represents to us, all the way through to these final fall feast days, what many believe refer to His coming again, His return for His people. This is also another sign for us to look at about the time of the Mashiach's birth, actually. There's discussions that it could have happened on Yom Teruah, the first day of the month, or many believe on Sukkot. So those two would be the most accurate times of when He would have been born. My opinion on this is that there was sounding of the shofars is going to sound His return. It's also, I think it was the same time when He was born. Then He was going to atone for our sins on Yom Kippur, which happens to be 10 days later. And then we go into the final where we get to commune with Him. We get to abide with Him. That's what the Feast of Tabernacles is. You're tabernacling with Him. You're abiding with Him. You're spending that time of intimacy with Him for 8 days in a row, and with those fellow believers. And that's why this month is such an important month that we got to get it right. So I pray that this study has maybe opened your eyes to be able to look at these calendars a little differently, so that you can discern and you can see for yourself. I believe myself that this is the most accurate calendar that I have. I don't trust any others, because I believe this is what the Scripture prescribes for us to understand the times and the seasons we're in. So I pray that He continues to open our eyes and give us even more deeper revelation of this. And in doing so, He's going to give us even deeper truths about all that we are doing and observing, so that we can come into alignment the way He's called us to do. Hallelujah. I just pray, Father, that You'll continue to minister to Your people as they continue to come out and come into your paths, returning back to Your ways, and giving us a better understanding of your calendar. We're so thankful and grateful for opening our eyes and helping us to see more clearly. So continue to lead and guide us and direct us in our paths so that we can continue to fulfill your will and to receive all that you have in store for us that's contained in following your calendar and being on time for your feast. So we give you praise and honor this day through and in Yahushua HaMashiach. Hallelujah, Father. Hallelujah. Barak your name forevermore. Hallelujah. All right. Now I'm going to come over here and open this discussion up for everyone to maybe add some more to this, or maybe just give your confirmation, however that you feel. Some of this is going to be very new to you. I hope that those that were on the fence are now able to see a little bit better what this calendar really represents. So I guess I'd like to go ahead and start with Brother D, just so you can give your input for us and your thoughts this morning. I know you came to a conclusion last week, and hopefully this helps cement it even a little bit more. So any thoughts from you, Brother D or Milo? Are you there? You have me on mute? Because I have you unmuted. All right, I guess I can come back to you in a little bit. So raise your hand when you're back, or if you're there. All righty, April, Avon, good morning. Shabbat shalom to you. Any thoughts you have for us this morning? Are you there? Got yourself muted too? Okay, there's Brother D's hand up. Try to unmute you again. There you go. There you go.
Cool. This is a topic, man, for me personally that requires out of Zoom time study.
I got you.
It's something hard to totally swallow all the information in one shot.
Right.
But I think I stand the same place I did on last Shabbat. I think you helped me out with understanding. It makes more sense to go by the equinox rather than the equilux. That made sense to me for the sake of like unity, universal unity. There's still a couple of human questions in my mind. Like who were the first people to designate where the equator is and who determines what that is.
Right.
But it seems confirmed by various scientists and people that study the constellations and the way the earth works that they all agree that the equator is in the same spot and the sun meets at the same spot, and that's called the spring equinox. So there doesn't seem to be any wiggle room for anything different. So with that being said, it makes sense that would be a good starting point for the change of the seasons, and and then we go by obviously where I stand with the new moon. I go by new moon after that, so which we were on the same page. But I think me and you go by different phases of the moon. You go by the first sign of light, and I go by the conjunction when it's completely dark, and that comes from my stance on how everything else works. I believe a day starts when the sun goes down, evening and morning. The Day of Atonement, Leviticus chapter 23, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Day of Atonement's on the 10th day of the year of the 7th month. And but it says keep it from the 9th at evening, from evening to evening. So to me, a day starts when it's completely dark. So that's when I think the new moon, the new month begins, is when that last phase goes to an end and we can't see the light anymore. Other than that, it's a lot of good information. Thank you for putting it together. Thank you for collaborating with Jadiel. And it's definitely something my wife and I, we're going to have to look into together and kind of solidify the conviction and confirm it. But thank you. And thank you for putting the links on the bottom too. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing, Brother D, that I found in this discussion with Yadiel is that we're really not off really that much. You're looking at a conjunction. I look at the conjunction in a sense too, but it's actually the day after the conjunction is my first day, which is kind of so when you're looking at it, you're looking at a conjunction. I am too, but I'm looking at it from the backside of the conjunction, where you're looking at it at the conjunction. Yadiel is one in the evening of my first day is his first day. So all three of us within that one day really essentially are almost in one regard. We're just off like a half a day either way. So, you know, I thought that was pretty interesting. So I just wanted to share that with you. But yeah, there's a lot to digest here, and I do definitely encourage everyone to really press in and go deeper on your own, and to see what else you find that may help confirm some things for you. All I'm doing is presenting information so that you can hear it from a different perspective. The details of where we may be off a little bit here and there is so minimal that we're basically in alignment, I feel. A half a day either way. And until I see some more, I see both ways actually, because Brother Yadiel put out some good arguments of why he believes as well. So I think all three of us, you know, we may not be in 100% harmony, but we're about 98, 99% there. So I guess that's as close as we can ask. And as long as we're going to be together and observing these things, I think that's really all that matters. So thank you, Brother D. I appreciate you. And I'm going to ask you to lift your hand, raise your hand if you have anything. I think that maybe make this go a little bit faster than me trying to open it up for everyone. So I guess we'll go from there. And Brother D got his hand up. I'll unmute you one more time.
I just wanted to say amen to that, brother. And I'm grateful for that. Hallelujah.
Me too. Hallelujah. All right. Anybody else got anything that they'd like to add to this by raising your hand? I think everyone understands how to do the electronic raising of hands, but if not, all right. It seems like nobody's really got. I think we got another one here. Is that Milo?
No, I must have hit it by accident.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, no problem.
Maybe you should call on people like you did last time, just in case.
Okay. Well, we got Brother Jay. He got his hand up, so we'll go that way at the moment. Shalom, Brother Jay.
Shalom, brother. How you doing today? Everybody's blessed, right?
Always.
I just want to give my gratitude to all your work you just put into doing this. It really helps me much to lay out something, like you said, put our own calendars together to be on one same page. So I just want to say thank you and glorify Yahuah for giving you that insight. And, you know, it's a blessing, you know, for me. I mean, I know for myself, I've struggled a lot trying to figure out the Passover, and I just speak to my brothers I can that are more knowledgeable about this. And, you know, I want to celebrate. And like you said, it's a very important thing, so that we need to know these things. So I just want to say thank you, man. I just want to give my thanks. And I praise the Father for giving you that, you know. So have a blessed one. I'm going to be continuing to hear everybody, though.
Hallelujah. Well, you know, when you get a passion or a fire up that's shot up in your bones, as the scripture says, you ain't really got no choice. I've been struggling with this one like you have for a long time, and I wanted to be right, but, you know, sometimes You got to go dig in. You got to start digging to find out if you really want to know the truth. He'll give it to you, and I feel confident. I'm sure as most of you do now that you at least can understand what it means when he's given these things to us for. So we can try to be on time at least, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, Passover. I want to celebrate Passover correctly. I want to celebrate, you know, and I'm still learning how to celebrate the other feasts. Because I mean, I'm barely a few years in, you know. So, but I appreciate the fellowship. I appreciate again just being a part of with everybody here, so I can learn more. And I got to be humble in that aspect, you know. So again, thank you.
Love you, brother.
Love you too, brother. Thank you.
All righty. Kefa, you're up.
Shabbat
You got your hand up. Shalom, shalom.
How you doing? Shabbat. I'm listening. I'm so grateful. Just wanted to say thank you for all the information that you put on, showing us. You know, I know that I'm not very knowledgeable of the calendar, but I know certain things. But I do know one thing that we're gonna get everything straight when we're in Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, and celebrate the perfect feast. And we're doing the best we can.
Right.
But I'm really grateful that you were able to put this together and see it, but one thing I am grateful. I'm grateful to be born in October.
Yeah.
I was born in October of the 10th.
Oh wow. Wow, that is a great day.
Yeah, and a good time. So I'm grateful for that. But thank you so much, Rick, for your heart and your wisdom and understanding, and may Yah continue to bless you and guide you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right.
Appreciate you, my friend. I see Joan, you got your hand up. You there, Joan? Where'd she go? Oh, there it is. Unmute you. There. You're unmuted? Shalom, shalom, Joan. I just seen you a second ago. Where'd you go? Alrighty. Anybody else got anything while we wait for Joan? No, we got some callers down here. They can't probably raise their hand, so I'll check in with you guys. Is this Stacy? 470?
Shabbat shalom, Maki.
I remembered your number. Shalom, good to hear your voice. Good to hear you.
Good to hear you too. I just want to say, Mamash Tov, this was very good and very much appreciated for all your hard work. And I have to agree with you on a lot of things, and also with Brother D on these topics as the calendar goes. You have to harmonize what the scriptures say and what's going on in the world. So the key thing is harmony. And we have to use whatever tools we have along with scriptures and just pay attention to what the signs and the Shemayim tell us. And don't get discouraged because we can't all just uproot ourselves and go to Jerusalem and see what's going on. Just use whatever tools you have, pay attention, and you'll be able to see. And if we're not all understanding what's going on, like you say, dig deep into the scriptures. If Yahuah wants to reveal you to you, he will. And if you're seeking him, he will be found. So just keep going. And again, thank you. And I love you, brother, for all your good hard work.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate your kind words and all your wisdom that you bring to the table. I know that you do your studies too, so I can appreciate that. So thank you again. Good to hear your voice.
Good to hear you too, brother.
All righty. All right, Joan, looks like you're back. Unmute you. There you go. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can now. Hi.
I can barely hear you guys.
Really? Is anybody else having that kind of issue, or is it just Joan? I guess that would help. I don't know. I'm not sure how to help you with that. Maybe Brother D can give me some pointers. He's usually a good guy.
So can you hear what I'm saying now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll just send a text message or something. I don't know, because I can't hear you, so I can hear you, but just barely.
Well, I can hear you fine. Maybe I'll try to work on turning my volume up somehow.
Okay, so if you can hear me good, I'm just gonna say Shabbat Shalom to everybody, and just like somebody else just said, thank you for all of the time you took to do the lesson. I have to say that my understanding of half of what you were saying is different. So I would have to disagree with half of it. And that's only because it seems like your source document is incorrect. According to what I've been shown by the Ruach HaKodesh, is the source document that I don't think is correct. But, I can't hear you guys. I can't hear you good. So I'm just going to leave it with that. And then if maybe when I get this system working a little better, I can maybe say something else.
Well, I can hear you just fine. So if there's something you want to share as far as your source documents that you feel, I'm open to hearing your thoughts.
Well, I can't tell where I saw your links, but your links go to Yahuah Kingdom, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So my question would be, where did that information come from? Because if that information came from the NASA documents, because you said a lot of things that I don't see scripturally. One of them was you talked about planets and some other things in the solar system that I don't agree with, and scripturally I don't see. And when I do study, I have to say, whenever I read anything on the internet, I have to find out where that person got the information from, and then where that person got the information from, and so on. It goes back to NASA, and NASA is I would say, an entity that I don't trust. I don't trust that what they are saying is true. And so I can't find what they say scripturally. And then because of this, I went into a really, really deep study, and Yahuah showed me a dream of the earth, and he allowed an angel to take me in the depth of the earth. According to NASA, the earth is round and spinning and all of that. But that is contrary to what I was shown in this dream, and it's contrary to what I see in the ancient texts. So that's such a long story that I'll just table that for another time. But that's why I don't agree with what you were saying.
I understand your points of view on that. I'm not necessarily looking at NASA or any other entity or website. What I'm looking at is the stars, where they line up, whatever you want to call them or title them. They have been titled or named, if you will, with the Mars and Venus and those type of things. Those are things that we can see with our eyes, telescopes and those type of things. And they do line up in certain areas at certain times. That's what I'm talking about, not necessarily the, where NASA or any of that would come in. Not sure what you're alluding to there other than the planets and stuff that I've named. But in our understanding, that's what we know them as, and where they may line up from or come from. So that's why they were referenced as far as part of the constellation of how things line up and how they adjust. Whatever names you want to give them, stars, but or that we call them planets or however. But there is circuits of how things flow. We can see it with our own eyes as far as when the sun rises and sets and all of these different determining factors that I've outlined. But I'd like to hear more of what you got. Maybe that'll bring some more clarity to my understanding as well. But I appreciate your input for sure, and hopefully you can hear me better next time. I'm not sure why you're not able to hear, but others are saying they hear me fine. So might be on your end. But we appreciate
thank
you.
you.
All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else in here that has their hand up? Let's see here. I didn't get to say good morning, Kathy. Shabbat Shalom. And you got to say good morning to you, but we wanted to say good morning. And any thoughts you have for me or for us?
No, Shabbat Shalom. No, good study, Rick. Good study. I thank Yahuah for you, the wisdom and knowledge, through the Ruach, because I wouldn't know, and I'm sure many of the others wouldn't have a clue where to go or find any of this information from the three of you. So I appreciate everybody's wisdom, and
Me too.
I guess that's it. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay.
All righty. Good morning, Mike. I know you ain't got your hand up, but I still wanted to say hello to you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, brother. Awesome presentation.
Hi, good looking. Hello.
Hi.
Anything you'd like to add or any thoughts this morning for us?
No, I mean, you know where I stand. Well, I'm still studying, my sunrise and sunrise, and I'm right now myself. We're following the solar calendar, not the lunar. As in, we let the sun. Well, you know where I'm at, but I definitely agree with some of the stuff you said there. Some of that, I take as fact myself. Yeah, that's just the only place where we differ at is, you guys still use the moon to determine months, but we don't really do that. I personally don't see that in the older text. I only see that out after Babylon, So, but no, I mean, like I said, still definitely appreciate the work you put in there. It's a lot of stuff. My studies aren't that well organized and intense, so maybe they should be, huh?
Well, they're all good as long as we're studying, and looking for it. That's all that matters. We may differ in a few different areas, but as long as we're all interested in trying to find the truth and the path and trying to live it by it, that's what matters, I think. Until he shows us something concrete, because there's nothing 100% solid other than what he says. The sun, moon, and stars have to be involved somehow. So.
Like, I feel like as long as at the end of the day we can be in unity, that's the goal. I think that's the reason why we have the calendar is for the very fact of unity.
Yeah, that's why I think that's why Hasatan is perverted so bad and bad. But,
yeah.
Well, I appreciate your brother, and I appreciate your little brother. You got lots to say. Shalom.
Shalom. Shalom.
He's almost got it.
Say shalom. Shalom. Hello, Mama Linda.
Alrighty, I see William Hernandez got your hand up. I'm going to lower it and go for it. Morning, William. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. How you doing, Rick? How's everybody doing?
Hey, we're doing wonderful here on this Shabbat together.
Yeah. I've been in and out, man. I just want to check in before we move over to Darian there. But, yeah, y'all in the car with me. I had to run to the store, but just trying to participate and be a part here, I find very interesting what you're doing here with this. And, I'm just kind of sitting back and absorbing, everything. And before I decide where exactly I am with all this, because it is some information that you obviously have really sunk your brain and some time into this. So I just want to say I really appreciate your effort because, I'm not going to shoot anything down or nay or yay it because I'm a very optimistic person, What's up there in his infinite mine is not what's in ours. So, you know, any of the stuff you're talking about, that there might be some possibilities there. So, you know, I am open to a lot of what you're saying. Still trying to wrap my mind around a lot of things. It's a lot of information here, but but I just want to say, keep it going, man. Keep it going. And like the brother said before you, it's all about, we each got our mind, and things are going to pop up, ideas, what ifs, and you know, as long as we can keep that in mind, these are yours. You know, the young lady too, before the gentleman just left us. I'm horrible with names. Still trying to remember people's names, but she has her mindset. The gentleman now, he has his. This is mine. And like he said, you know, as long as at the end of the day we can respect that we each got our thoughts and our minds on certain things, but still come together, meeting at the core truth of this, things that matter, you know, the most. That's the most important thing, you know. But just keep it going, man. Keep it going.
We're gonna keep her going best we can, for sure, pursuing it. And it helps to have brothers and sisters like y'all here to, you know, continue pressing forward and encouraging one another, you know, to continue to fight the fight, if you will, continue to strive for the best perfection we can, you know, and that's all we're doing. You know, there's no condemnation of anybody's beliefs. I mean, it's not my job to change anyone's ideas or beliefs. It's just I'm presenting facts and information the best I know, and what makes sense to me and what I see in the studies I've done. You know, you can use all kinds of sources as long as, you know, they're in agreement in some sense, and they try to bring clarity. And there's so much ambiguity here. It's hard to break all this down and who's right and who's wrong and what's the real factors, because it's not 100% clear. You got to use a lot of resources to try to bring it all together into one thought, I guess. You know, it is a lot. So, but hopefully we get the answers.
Yeah. It's all about trying to connect the dots, you know.
That's what it is with all of this, you know, connecting the dots and trying to find 2 or 3 witnesses that'll confirm any matter. You know, that's the conundrum we got. You know, is all of these things.
I did find the young lady's testimony interesting. I'd like to hear a little more on that in the future.
Yeah, I agree. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you, and be safe on your travels there until you get to wherever you're going.
Yeah, I'll be at home in about 10 minutes.
Okay, cool.
All right.
All righty. Thank you very much. Anybody else got anything? Any other hands raised that we want to talk before I shut down the recording? I don't see any. So thank you once again for all of your input and your time. And may Yahuah open our eyes and put us on the right path to obeying what he wants us to obey and do what he wants us to do. And I'm going to continue to walk with you all as best I can. Hallelujah. All righty, everybody. Have a good day. Shabbat shalom.